Ouija boards were not always a staple in horror subcultures, though they have a rather ominous reputation now. Catholic.com, for instance, describes the Ouija as far from harmless. The fear surrounding the board wasn't always as common. We had a rather different relationship with the dead in the past. With an average lifespan of only 50 years old, inescapable death was not a thought easily avoided. But instead of fear, it was normal, even wholesome, to speak with past loved ones through a medium. So let's explore the Ouija board's history. Before the Ouija board came modern spiritualism. It was born in Rochester, New York, when 3 sisters, the Fox sisters, were invited to a home to demonstrate their abilities and commune with the spirit of a dead girl who had been murdered within that very house. The idea that one could speak with the dead was not a new one, but magic and mysticism had reached America in ideas such as those shared by Franz Anton Mesmer, an Australian healer, and Emanuel Swedenborg, a Swedish philosopher who described the afterlife. When the Fox sisters made professional tours around the country, showcasing their abilities as mediums, the practice created a revolutionary hubbub. In a time when death was commonplace, speaking to loved ones who have passed away was an appealing prospect. Mediums, or intermediaries between the living and the dead, were in great demand and had created some rather interesting, if noisy, ways of communicating. This usually involved table turning, in which the medium and sitters would sit at a table with their fingers lightly rested atop it as they waited for spiritual contact. The table would tilt, shake, rock in response to a letter of the alphabet as it was spoken aloud. A less obnoxious technique came in the form of spirit writing, in which a pencil was attached to a small basket. All the medium needed to do was establish contact with the pencil as the spirit wrote out its message. Eventually, the baskets were replaced with an early form of the planchette, with the pencil resting in the hole of it while the medium touched the planchette itself. However, this often ended in illegible writing that was nearly impossible to interpret. Obviously, that's an inefficient way of communicating, and seances actually took a really long time to complete because of how long it would take to call out the entire alphabet for a response. And naturally, the novelty of the technique wore off when the chore of interpreting the message began. People were desperate for faster ways to communicate, some designing complexly engineered devices such as the dial plate, but these went largely ignored. And that's when the talking board joins the scene. It's 1886, and news agencies began to report an exciting new device called a talking board that is a huge sensation within the spiritualist movement. Though articles praising the talking board spread far and wide, it wasn't until a shrewd salesman in Baltimore, Charles Kennard, acted upon it that it became known as the Ouija board. He pulled together a few investors, including a local attorney, Elijah Bond, to start the Kennard Novelty Company, with the intention of exclusively making and marketing these talking boards. Though none of the investors were spiritualists themselves, they were businessmen and they had identified a niche. But the Ouija board hadn't quite been born yet. Popular belief holds that the Ouija is a combination of the word oui, meaning yes, and the German word ja, also meaning yes. However, Ouija board historian Robert Murch, who has been studying the history of the board since 1992, states that it was actually Elijah Bond's sister-in-law, Helen Peters, a talented medium who helped supply the name. After the board supplied its name, Ouija, and stated its origin as Egyptian, meaning good luck, Helen acknowledged that she had the name of a woman in her locket, Ouija. It is possible that she simply misread the name, as there was an author at the time, Ouida, whom Helen Peters greatly admired. Helen's major role in Ouija board history doesn't end with its name, however. Bond was having a difficult time obtaining a patent for the talking board. The Ouija board, in the patent's office Rational Minds, was a frankly ridiculous concept. No patent office wanted to be the one to provide the patent to this company, much less entertain the idea that the board could work. However, finally, in 1891, Bond was summoned to Washington. A chief patent officer, whose name was unknown by the pair, requested a demonstration. If the board could correctly identify the officer's name, he would give Bond the requested patent. So Bond took Helen with him, and together the trio sat down to commune with the spirits, and sure enough, the planchette dutifully spelled out the officer's name. Now, whether Bond already knew his name from his time as a patent attorney or whether it was truly spirits is unknown, but in any case, the shaken and white-faced patent officer did indeed give Bond his patent for his toy. The patent doesn't describe exactly how the game worked, only that it did, and that was part of its appeal. The less understood the Ouija board was, the more it fueled sales. The game was met with huge success, the Kenner Novelty Company going from one factory in Baltimore to 2 factories in each of Baltimore, New York, Chicago, and even one in London in a single year. In the years following its prolonged success, the board was marketed to a weird niche of American culture. It was part oracle, part mystical, part family entertainment, a board game with a dash of supernatural excitement. It appealed to a wide demographic, all ages, professions, and education. People wanted to believe in something, and the Ouija board provided that. Especially in uncertain times, popularity surged during World War I and the mania of the Jazz Age. Using it was so normalized that it inspired art featured in newspapers, literature, and poetry. Aside from the few allegedly Ouija-inspired murders, the board endured as popular, interesting, and harmless until 1973, when one movie changed everything.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
It might not come as a surprise that movies can influence pop culture, but up until 1973, depictions of Ouija boards on television were mainly corny and goofy. There's even an episode of I Love Lucy, a comedy in the 50s, in which Lucy and Ethel hold a seance with one.
Do you Ouija?
What's that?
Do you Ouija?
Well, I'm not sure.
I mean, have you had any success with the Ouija board?
Oh, Ouija board. Oh, no, I haven't gotten around to that yet.
But then The Exorcist hits theaters, scaring crowds with all its special pea soup effects and its true storiness and its head-spinning, body dysmorphing. If you've never seen The Exorcist, there's some spoilers ahead. In The Exorcist, young Regan is possessed by a demon, and the movie implies the possession occurred when she played with the board by herself. The implication completely changed how people viewed Ouija boards. Now popularly seen as a tool of the devil, authors and movie makers of the horror genre used it as their own tool in their stories. The following years saw the Ouija board denounced by religious groups, to be burnt in bonfires with copies of Harry Potter, and televangelists like Pat Robertson declaring demons can reach us through it.
Practice it is, because the idea is that you're dealing with a spirit. The spirit is causing that little
needle or whatever it is.
I'm trying to, whatever they call that thing, it goes around to letters and spells out words, and so you feel like some dead person. But actually it is communicating with demonic spirits. It is a dangerous thing, and I strongly urge people not to get involved in it.
Not that the fear drove away sales for the Parker brothers, and later Hasbro, who acquired them. There was just a new reason to buy the boards. They were spooky instead of spiritual, and the thrill of danger surrounded them. In recent years, there's been a surge of Ouija board popularity. I myself own 2. With it appearing in many TV shows, too many to list, and even its own film series. Good movies, by the way. Hasbro has also released new versions of the board, including one that glows in the dark. In 2019, Salem, Massachusetts, the Talking Board Historical Society debuted the world's largest Ouija board that's 9,000 pounds and 3,168 square feet. If you love Ouija boards, definitely check it out. I put a link to the Talking Board Historical Society's website in the description if you'd like to read more about it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing for more content on all things mysterious, dark, and creepy.